I will give the floor to our first speech for the students, Hallie and Michelle.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Hung, a sophomore at Westborough High School. Hallie and I are both on the planning board of the Energy Fair, and after months of preparing for this event, we cannot begin to express how excited we are to be here today. Everything I've participated in, from Sustainable Westborough, this Energy Fair, to the high school's environmental club, have been inspired by my involvement in the biodiversity project in my 6th grade class. At that age, I wasn't aware that climate change was a problem until we started that project. We were each given an endangered species to do research on, and the months of preparation for our final presentation was eye-opening. To a 6th grader, learning about habitat loss, invasive species, poaching, overpopulation, at least to me, were all new concepts that took me by surprise. As I dug deeper into my research, I saw connections between the impacts of human activity and why many species are becoming endangered and extinct. After the biodiversity project and seeing the lack of action taken to fix this problem, I realized that this is what I wanted to do in the future. Someone who can help make an impact and a positive change for our planet before it's too late. Being part of an organization like Sustainable Westborough has given me a new perspective on what adults are doing to combat climate change on a local level. The months we spent preparing for this energy fair helped me learn that there are organizations out there that are also concerned, and it helped me understand that we still have a long way to go and things to accomplish. I would like to thank everyone for being here today. Attending this fair and learning more about climate change is ultimately the first step we can take towards fixing the problem.
Hello, my name is Hallie Pellish, and I am also a sophomore here at Westborough High School. And I found my passion for the environment in the same 6th grade class as Michelle when we spent months on a unit on biodiversity. My parents had always been environmentally conscious, limiting plastic use, energy consumption, and waste. But I thought of this all as simply conserving the earth. I didn't understand the full extent of the problems we face with climate change and global warming. Not only did this unit on biodiversity deepen my understanding of what the conservation of Earth means, I came to realize that what my family was doing was still not nearly enough. I began to research and learn more about global warming to see how I could help. I made many personal lifestyle changes. I limit plastic use whenever I can. I am now a vegetarian, and I compost at home through Black Earth Composting, who is here today. Last year, I reached out to Peter Dunbeck to see how I could get involved on a local level and make change in my community. Michelle and I have been fortunate to work with Sustainable Westborough, and I have served as a liaison between Sustainable Westborough and the high school's environmental club. This experience has been so beneficial to me, seeing how we can take realistic and practical actions to better our community. It's very difficult to know how to change decades of inaction to an era of definitive action. All of us gathered here today are aware of what we face as a world, as a nation, and as a community. We know that we cannot ignore this problem anymore. We know of the clear evidence of climate change, and we know that what we face is monumental. So what do we see in the US? One of the consequences we see is increasing hurricanes. 2021 was the 3rd most active hurricane season on record. This graph shows how increasingly common tropical hurricanes and tropical storms have become. You can see that from 1995 to 2005, hurricanes show a sharp increase in frequency. Many hurricanes cause devastating floods and multi-million-dollar damage. The image here of a flood caused by a hurricane is not in the south part of the country, instead in New Jersey, much closer to us. We also have increasingly common severe droughts throughout the country. The image here is a map of areas most affected by drought. The yellow and orange areas are abnormally dry, while the red and maroon areas are in extreme drought. As you can see, the western US has been most affected by drought. The graph shows how much more common severe drought has become in that region. We heard so much about wildfires this year. Similar to drought, most wildfires occur in the west of the country. That is visible on the map above that shows how many acres of forest burn in 1 square mile of each state every year. The yellow areas of the country see very few acres burned by wildfires, usually none. The orange areas generally see 1 to 2 acres burned per square mile, and the red areas see 3 to 6 acres burned per square mile. The graph exhibits how these numbers have increased in recent years. You can see the upward trend of increasingly large fires as the years progress, and how the western states have increasingly large amounts of land burning. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of this 2 degrees Celsius limit, but what does that really mean? In the 1970s, an economist at Yale, William Nordhaus, discovered that a rise in global temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius would be the highest temperatures any human civilization had ever experienced, and would be a turning point that would come with devastation to weather, ecosystems, agriculture, and sea levels. In 2010, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, used the data originally found by Nordhaus in an international accord, but contained no plan of action. 2 degrees Celsius was a set limit in 2015 in the Paris Agreement, and countries put forth more concrete plans, but the Paris Agreement is non-binding and unenforceable. At our current rate, we are set to reach 1.5 Celsius by 2040 and 2 degrees Celsius by 2060. And this 2 degrees Celsius is a big deal. I understand that most think that 2 degrees Celsius can't possibly be that much change, as it does not seem like a huge difference in temperature, but we are already seeing the devastation. We have true evidence of the rising temperatures, as 2020 was the hottest year on record. 2 degrees Celsius also puts millions of people at high risk of displacement. It is expected that 2 degrees will bring sea levels up 6 meters higher than they are today. The colors on this map of the world show how many people in millions are estimated to be displaced due to rising sea levels. As you can see from the key, 12 to 24 million people are expected to be displaced due to rising sea levels in the US alone. But what if the temperature rises higher than 2 degrees? 2 degrees brings slowly approaching destruction of habitats and civilization, but at 3 degrees we see rapidly approaching destruction and much higher sea levels, destroying numerous coastal cities, including our own Boston. At 4 degrees, we expect to see Europe and Southern Asia in constant drought, some of those areas converted to desert, and an unbearable climate in the current southwest deserts of America. 5 degrees could mean the end of our species. However, it's important to remember that it is extremely difficult for us to imagine and to perceive how these temperature changes will impact our daily lives, and this is not inevitable. Change in our community may be the most practical and vital step to prevent these degrees of global warming. We are ultimately leaving this world to future generations. The older generations must change for my generation, as I must change for future generations. Please take the opportunity today to see exhibitors present in the room next door and see how you can take action.
Relating back to our biodiversity project, a key takeaway for me was learning the impact that human activities have on the environment. Not only that, but also how the effects of that impacted environment can have on humans. There has been evidence that particles of air pollution travel through pregnant women's lungs and lodge in their placentas. In a recent U.S. Census Bureau working paper, while exploring the long-term and even the multi-generational effects of pollution, they found that pollution affects not only individuals exposed directly and those exposed while in the womb, but also the second generation, or children of those directly exposed. In other words, if a woman is exposed to pollution while pregnant, it may affect both the child she's carrying and her grandchildren. Those pollutants are the outcomes of the actions from previous generations, and its consequences will be experienced by the future generations. Human activities are the main drivers of acid rain, and over the past few decades have released many different chemicals into the air, which have changed the mix of gases in the atmosphere. The pollution that causes acid rain can also create tiny particles that when these particles get into people's lungs, they can create health problems or make existing health problems worse. Researchers at the University of Washington have found a mild increase, less than 10%, in airflow obstruction. In a healthy person, this might not be perceptible, but the 10% loss may be critical in an asthmatic individual who might either already be obstructed or compromised, or even an elderly person who might be 40% compromised. Many of my friends have asthma or exercise-induced asthma, making physical activities hard without using their inhalers prior. The 10% loss can make people with asthma less willing to exercise. In other words, acid in the atmosphere prevents asthmatics from getting the exercise they need for their overall health. In addition, acid rain caused many lakes in the northeast of the United States and other places to have much lower pH levels. Acid rain creates conditions that threaten the survival of aquatic life, and this decrease in acidity can be deadly to aquatic wildlife, including phytoplankton, mayflies, trouts, and other creatures that are part of the food web. The sensitivity of some species to acidity contributes to their decline in population. Water with low pH also causes gill damage in fish and death to fish embryos. Reproductive failure is the primary way acid rain causes animal extinction in aquatic systems. Extinctions in these ecosystems can threaten the existence of another species in the food web, which could cause more damage and eventually end up affecting humans. This is just one example of how our day-to-day action can cause immense destruction to not just us, but also the things around us. As the trend continues, sea level rising and floods become an everyday thing. Moisture in the air and higher sea surface temperatures causes a surge in extreme hurricanes and tropical storms. Brutal infrastructure destruction and flooding kills thousands and displaces millions. We are the ones who have to live through our ever-changing environment, and the uncertainty that the future holds is a frightening reality for us. We have also been seeing an increase in flooding in Boston over the past few years. Among the vulnerable spots are commercial piers, Logan International Airport, the New England Aquarium, and apartment buildings in the newly redeveloped Seaport area. The effects are evident already when seawater at high tide has lapped onto some of these streets, even on the days when the sun is shining. By the end of the century, a large part of the Dorchester neighborhood, which at its own would be the 4th largest city in Massachusetts, could be underwater. The sea level off the coast of Massachusetts is 8 inches higher than it was in 1950, and it has dramatically accelerated in recent years. For many cities, floods that once occurred every 100 years are expected to become annual events, or even more frequent by 2050. Simple and small lifestyle changes made as a whole will benefit us all. Eliminating the use of single-use plastics, eating less meat, and switching to public transportation will heavily reduce the effects that we are already experiencing. Instead of viewing these habits as a burden, know that these simple actions are a step closer to limiting the impacts of the climate crisis and ensuring a safe and healthy future for our children. When your mind tells you that it is too late to make a difference, remember that every fraction of a degree of extra warming makes a huge difference. Therefore, any reduction in emissions lessens the burden on our future and future generations.
Scientists in the 1980s knew exactly what needed to be done, but could not convince politicians to move on this issue. The way to solve this crisis is to tackle it politically and aim for government action. Environmental legislation is the most promising solution. It requires people to make changes to their lives or business practices. It targets corporations who aren't as inclined to change, and it ensures that everyone moves forward for the solution together by adhering to the laws. On the national level, some of the most well-known regulations are the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. For a brief overview of each, the Clean Air Act puts limits on the pollution emitted into the air. The Clean Water Act outlaws the pollution of any waterways in the US without a permit from the EPA. The Endangered Species Act restricts the hunting of any endangered or threatened species. Amongst these initiatives is the fuel efficiency standards that will require car models in 2023 and later to be able to drive around 40 miles per gallon. Not only does this legislation benefit the environment and the air we breathe, it also benefits drivers. These standards require cars to drive much farther on less gas, saving us a lot of money, especially at the rates we see gas prices at today. Fuel economy legislation is straightforward, definitive action. Such standards are needed in other areas of our economy. On the state level, the most recent action has been Governor Baker approving legislation that will have Massachusetts reach net zero emissions by 2050, principally by increasing the amount of wind power Massachusetts receives from offshore wind farms. At the town level, we have recently enacted a no idling policy and have implemented the Climate Action Plan. The Climate Action Plan has led to the purchase of an all-electric Ford Mustang Mach-E for the police department.
In 5 to 10 years, vast areas of the planet will be increasingly inhospitable to humans. We are fortunate to live in a beautiful, diverse, nurturing planet, and our children and their children deserve the same. It is not fair to the generations to come to live through the result of our actions. We are only experiencing the minimal effects that are nothing compared to what the young individuals will face in the future. They will have to overcome the full, devastating consequences of climate change, yet they are the least responsible for its impacts. They will inherit a planet with more frequent and extreme weather effects than ever before. The main driver of the future of the planet is the actions we choose to take today. We have the power to decide what kind of future the coming generations of life on Earth will have. These are some of the videos and pictures from when Hallie and I did our 6th grade biodiversity project. The future is frightening, and their account is of other scared individuals like ourselves that are doing their part for the environment despite the lack of action taken around them. We are hardwired to react to threats only if they are immediate, and we are experiencing it directly. Wildfires, droughts, cyclones give us ample evidence that threats from climate change are now immediate. These disasters will only increase in frequency, scale, and location if we fail to take action. Our negligence has catapulted climate change from an existing challenge to the crisis it is now. We are exponentially approaching the limits beyond what the planet can handle. We cannot deny or ignore this issue any longer, and we need to stop our half-hearted attempts and instead act in proportion to the magnitude of this problem.
It seems to me that there are two monumental obstacles preventing action. One is, as Michelle mentioned, our lack of ability to understand long-term consequences. This is no longer acceptable. The future is coming, and it is coming fast. The second is our feeling that we don't have to make any sacrifices. In the face of enormous existential crises, prior generations have made sacrifices, and there's no reason we can't do the same. We hope to see you all walk away from this moment with a future in mind, ready to make changes in your life to lower your carbon footprint. If you walk out these doors and take a right, you will have access to numerous options offered by the organizations here today. If you're looking for a more simple way to contribute, maybe think about limiting your meat consumption or reusing plastic containers. Either way, I hope everyone leaves here with a definitive action in mind to begin immediately to help save our planet.
Amongst the numerous exhibitors we have here today, we have 11 student exhibitors from Mill Pond, Gibbons, and the high school. If you get a chance this afternoon, please visit these groups and check out the projects that they have spent months working on. We hope everyone here today can take a moment to recognize what young individuals in our generation are trying to do to combat climate change before it's too late. Thank you so much for listening and for attending our 2022 Westborough Energy Fair.